Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to talk about a topic that you may or may not have heard of. We're going to talk about investing in I-bonds. With all the reports of our economy and stock market struggling to grow, I'll give you one guess as to what the I in I-bonds stands for. If you guessed inflation, you're exactly right. If you thought the I stood for incredible or important, that's okay. You may decide you feel that way about these bonds after our discussion. Of course, if you're new to the channel and want to see more financial education videos, please like and subscribe. We're on a schedule of a new video at least every month on investing and financial planning topics, and I really feel like we're just getting started. So join me on this journey. Alright, well let's start by looking at inflation. This is the thing everyone is talking about now. And obviously we all feel it. Gas is getting more expensive, groceries are getting more expensive, even things you wouldn't really expect. I went to the driving range the other day to hit golf balls, and a large bucket of balls had increased in price by $2. And when I mentioned the price change to the guy working behind the counter, he just said one word: inflation. According to the US Labor Department, the year-over-year change in the rate of inflation reached 8.6% this past May. This is the highest level of change we've seen in the US since 1981. Now, this has brought about some issues when investing. The stock market has reacted negatively, with the S&P 500 being down about 20%, putting it in bear market territory. Bond performance has faced a headwind in rising interest rates, and cash returns have suffered in the face of rising inflation eating up real returns. And the difficult thing, I think, is that a lot of young people who are accumulating and investing now weren't around in the 80s when inflation was high. So it can feel like treacherous territory to be navigating for the first time. We just uploaded a video about smart investing when inflation is high, so check that video out as well for more tips. We're focusing today on the I-bond, the inflation-linked savings bond. I'll go over what it is, what are the pros and cons, and how to purchase it. Okay, so what are they? I-bonds are government-issued debt securities, also called Series I-bonds. They're backed by the US government, which means you have close to zero default risk. The interest rate you receive on I-bonds is a combination of two factors, the fixed rate and the inflation rate. The fixed rate is set when you purchase the bond. Now this doesn't change and is currently 0%. The component of your interest tied to inflation does change and adjusts every 6 months. Based on changes in CPI inflation numbers, the Treasury sets new interest rates on the first business day of May and November. Now, here's where people get confused. Regardless of when you buy your I-bond, you're going to get the current rate of interest for 6 months. So even if you buy in October and the rate changes the following month, you'll get the interest rate you bought at for 6 months. The bond pays interest semi-annually. After your first 6 months of ownership, the interest rate you receive will change to reflect the updated inflation rate. Okay, let's get into the pros and cons of I-bonds. First, the good stuff. The current composite rate of interest is 9.62% for any bonds purchased between May and October 31st. Now that's an awesome rate of interest for a Treasury security. That's better than what cash has yielded in a long time. You're keeping up with inflation, and you're outperforming most stock indexes for the year. Keep in mind, you're probably not going to get exactly that rate of interest for the entire year. Because these bonds pay interest semi-annually, you're really getting half that number after 6 months, then the rate of interest will reset based on inflation. If inflation continues to be at a high level, then your rate of interest will remain attractive. According to the Treasury Direct website, the interest rate that you receive will never go below zero. So even if we have negative inflation or deflation, you're not at risk of losing your principal. Finally, although the interest you receive is taxable at the federal level, it's not taxable at the state or local level. And if you're cashing the bonds to pay for higher education expenses for yourself or a dependent, then it's not taxable at the federal level either. Okay, now we have to talk about the drawbacks and things to consider. First, there's a required holding period of at least 1 year. This means you shouldn't use your emergency fund to buy I-bonds since liquidity is an issue. There's also a penalty for cashing your bond before you've owned it for at least 5 years, where you give up the final 3 months of interest. Because the rate of interest you receive will fluctuate based off the level of inflation, this is something that you'll want to monitor periodically to be sure it's still the best use for your cash. So if you don't have the time or desire to do that, then it may not be the best choice for you. There's also a limit as to how much you can buy each year. Each individual can buy up to $10,000 of I-bonds each calendar year. If you receive a refund after filing your taxes, then you can buy an additional $5,000 of paper bonds using your refund money. So if you're a married couple and file jointly, that's up to $10,000 for each of you, plus an additional $5,000 if you receive a refund on your tax return. In addition, if you have a trust or a business such as an LLC or a corporation, you are able to buy I-bonds in the name of those entities. You get an additional $10,000 per calendar year for each of these different types of entities. My only advice here is to be sure you have the cash flow and liquidity to support tying up these funds for at least a year, and keep your personal and business bond holdings separate to avoid oversubscribing to these I-bond holdings. Finally, to purchase them, you need to go through the Treasury Direct website. They're not available to buy through your brokerage or trading account. This is not a modern system, and it can be a little frustrating at times. With a little patience and determination, I was able to create my own account and buy my first I-bonds in about 15 minutes. As impressive as the current rate of interest is, I-bonds are clearly not for everybody. If you don't have an adequate emergency fund, or you need the liquid cash to contribute to a retirement account, you should forego buying I-bonds. This should not replace a diversified equity and fixed income strategy. Although it's paying an attractive rate of interest now, that'll fluctuate with inflation, so there's a risk to tying up your funds for at least a year for an unknown rate of return. But if you can handle holding on to the bonds for the required year, and you're able to monitor it every 6 months, this is a pretty cool way to get a little additional interest on your idle cash. From a psychological perspective, owning I-bonds may help ease the pain you feel if inflation continues to rise, because now you have a security that is benefiting from that happening. That's all for now. Hope you learned something interesting about I-bonds. Make sure you like the video and subscribe to the channel. I'll see you on the next one.